Hello! We are coming to you today with a bit of a recap of some of the big news in the world of ad tech this week. Specifically, a federal judge just ruled that Google violated antitrust laws by monopolizing key parts of the programmatic advertising stack. A court found that Google tied together its ad server and its ad exchange in a way that really was monopolistic. It crushed competition, it hurt publishers, and left advertisers with fewer real choices. But what does this actually mean? What does this actually mean for the ecosystem, for media buyers, publishers, marketers, everyone? It's about Google, so it's always big news. But what does it actually mean? Does it actually have an impact on the average advertiser out there? So joining me today is Brian Binder, who leads our programmatic practice here at Tinuiti. And we're going to dive in with a few questions to hopefully help provide you with some clarity as to what's happening in the world. Brian, welcome to the show. And I'm excited to just pick your brain on what's exactly happening right now. So just to set the stage, I know I gave a brief synopsis, but can you give us a quick rundown on what this case was actually about and what did the judge rule in this case?
Yeah, I think when people think about Google in general, they know like how large it is. It's huge, right? Like they have YouTube, they have Google Search, they have Gmail. There's all these different pieces of Google. But as you were talking about, Google also has a large footprint within just the advertising technology space as well. So two of the main key components within the advertising space from a programmatic lens is going to be the supply path or the ad exchange, where a lot of publishers could actually say, hey, I have inventory, go get me advertisers. I want to monetize this inventory that I have on my website. And then advertisers could actually leverage the demand side platforms that they could actually go say, hey, I want to go buy this inventory. And Google actually owns technology on both sides of the coin. So they're helping work with the advertisers to find that inventory. They're also working with the publishers to find the advertisers. So they're effectively a matchmaker, if you will, of just trying to help provide the common ground between the advertiser and the publisher, which in theory sounds really great.
Sure, there could be some market efficiencies there when you think about how these things can interact and perhaps integrate with signals and velocity and so forth, but maybe it's not all roses.
Exactly. So what we actually found in the court case and what the ruling came out with yesterday was there's obviously the monopoly side of having both sides of the advertising ecosystem, but then we also found out that there was maybe a little bit of nefarious work that was going on here too, because what Google was end up doing is also having their ad exchange get a first look at different bids from advertisers and also connecting the advertising inventory that they have with their own specific advertiser technology on the demand side. So it was definitely more geared towards shifting more of the inventory towards the Google ecosystem versus any of the other ecosystem, which ends up hurting publishers because it's not going to be as competitive, and also ends up hurting advertisers because they're not getting access to all the different inventory that they could if they're using different tools and technology.
Absolutely. Well, the nature. Anytime we see a monopoly like this out there, and this is true. You go back to Microsoft, right? When you think about the monopoly that they held with Internet Explorer, it really inhibits innovation. There's no real reason for them to change or develop new methods of ad buying or ad inventory opportunities, or just frankly just leave it as it is. You don't have a choice, and that isn't necessarily a great thing for the open internet. This case, though, and I think, look, it's challenging. It's got the same name. It is Google LLC versus the United States et al. This case is different from that other antitrust case, right? There was the one about, I think, Google Search that wrapped up earlier this year. What's the difference between that one and this one?
Yeah, so this one is going to be more focused on the advertising technology within the programmatic landscape. So you're going to be hearing more about things like AdX or Ad Exchange, and you'll be hearing more about DV360 and the demand side platform, where with the other case, you're going to be hearing a lot more about the divestiture of Google Chrome and being able to have the inventory from the search standpoint and just the Google search browser itself.
Interesting. And I wonder how this is all going to play when it comes to remediation, because there are going to potentially be two different surgeries being performed on the body simultaneously, which I'm not a doctor, but I can't imagine anyone out there is going, yeah, we should amputate the leg and the arm at the same time, because it's going to be a bit of a complicated situation. I guess this will make sense, but why? I don't know. It seems to matter for the publishers mainly. But why does this matter for the ad industry? Is this something that will actually change for advertisers and publishers here?
I think so. You hit on it, I think, a couple minutes ago, which is like the innovation. So if you look at the programmatic ecosystem, Now, we haven't really been hearing a lot of innovation coming from the Google side as much as we have from companies like Trade Desk. So we've been hearing about the rapid growth of like Trade Desk and all the different things that they've been doing. We're starting to see a little bit more of that start to pop up in recent past, but we really haven't seen a lot of that innovation. So I do think that there's going to be, depending on what ends up happening with the divestitures or whatever really the outcome is of the ruling from yesterday, I think there is going to be a lot more innovation, which is going to really be great for both the publishers and for the advertisers, because now you're going to start to see more competition pop up because there's just so much innovation happening with AI, and how do we leverage this from a supply standpoint, and how could advertisers really find their consumers across all the different partners that they work with. So I think that is really going to start to open up a lot more within the ecosystem for advertisers and for publishers to be able to connect with different advertisers that maybe they didn't have the opportunity to do before.
So this is really going to, is it this more about sort of the auction dynamics then of who can bid on inventory, or did this lock in anything like the ad format or anything like that? Or what is it going to, are we going to use different data streams now? Like what are the actual components of this that you think will be switched?
I think it's going to end up being all three, because as we saw what some of the feedback was in the ruling yesterday, was a lot of times if you were going through the Google ecosystem, Google was getting a first look. They were able
Mm,
to look at bids, and they were able to like place a bid first and be able to win that inventory. So you're going to start to see a little bit more of that auction dynamic element start to become a little bit more competitive for publishers, which is going to be really great. And then it could also start to open up more ad formats and just like different opportunities for some of these partners and our publishers that are actually working with Google and other ad tech companies as well, because we're just seeing this evolution of AI and how people are
yeah.
engaging with the internet. So I think it is going to start to open up a lot of opportunities for even new companies that aren't even around today to start to come in and just be like, hey, now there's a way we could bring in data. And now we've based off of this audience or this data set, maybe we could create a cool new product that could really help engage your audience, but then also make your site more engaging. So I think there's going to be
Yeah.
a lot of things. I'm very half glass, half full type of guy when I'm taking a look at this, but I think there's going to be a lot of really cool innovation that's going to end up coming out of this.
Yeah, well, and look, it certainly seems like a win for publishers, and I think in the next era of the internet, that is a critical group that we need to be very mindful of in terms of how is the free and open internet maintaining its ability to be monetized, and we don't have an internet for you and an internet for me if you have the means by which you can pay for content or pay for access to these things. That there is still this ad-supported open internet that's available. By the way, it's interesting because as you were talking about that, I was like, God, so it's kind of like Google had this. Google had a silent auction where you can see what the person before you has bid, and then everyone else had a Dutch auction where you just don't know if you're going to be overpaying or not or what's happening. And then they see the Dutch auction and they go, oh, yeah, okay, we'll just bid $1 higher. Oh, it's like the Price is Right effect, perhaps. They are the last one on the Price is Right table. And they go, what did the $1? Yeah, 301. And you always hate that person, but that's the way you play the game. And obviously, that's the way that Google has played this game. So, with that in mind, and I know we talked about some of the opportunities here, but do you have a view of what specific remedies may be applied here? And obviously, it's all speculation, but what do you think we could see? Like a breakup of Google, perhaps? That's what some of the headlines have been saying. What does that even mean?
Yeah, there's definitely going to be, I think, serious consideration from breaking up Google into a couple of different pieces. So you also mentioned
Okay.
like the search and the Chrome piece. So that could also be a thing outside of what's going on here. But even within here, you're going to have a breakup of potentially the DV360 or the DFP, and you're also going to have the supply side or ad exchange. Those could actually be separated because you don't want to have the same company seeing what the bids are, as we were just talking about, but then also working with the advertisers and pushing more advertising revenue to the Google inventory. So I think long and the short of it is like those two things will probably be the things that are on the docket to be broken up. And then it does
Mhm.
open up interesting opportunities for, we're not just talking about programmatic here, but then also like, how does this open up YouTube inventory? Because YouTube you can only get through DV360 and through Google Ads. So does this become part of the speculation or part of the conversation in the future as well, and being able to open up YouTube inventory to more people?
Meaning you could buy YouTube maybe through the trade desk?
Maybe it
Potentially.
becomes,
Look, it's again, we're all speculating here. No one knows, but that is an incredibly interesting proposition or potential, especially when you earlier talking about like the data streams that can come in here and curation comes to mind. When I think about this opportunity with what is the biggest streaming platform in the world, that opportunity is so constrained to the world of Google right now. And it's not really open to that other advertiser. And look, who makes that money today? It's still Google still making money on that. And there's a bull case I think here for Google that actually goes, they make more money out of this. They get better out of this because they will have more direct access points, and critically, they won't have the opportunity to just rest on their laurels. So I think that's pretty interesting. But I'd love to get your take on What does this mean for Google? Is this a bigger shift of maybe how their ad business works? Again, hypothetically, take a look into your crystal ball, and what do you think will happen to Google in a macro capacity? Do you think will we see a third trial maybe? Are there changes in the ways they'll always have to operate? Are there limitations of the deals they can strike with partners?
I think there's going to be a closer eye on the deals because we've just been seeing that as a common theme throughout all the different lawsuits that have been popping up over the last couple of years, just in general with Google. So I think that is definitely going to be, there's going to be a closer eye on those elements. I think for the long term, this is going to be a really big foundational shift for Google in general, because Google is just used to being the conglomerate that has all these different tentacles within the entire advertising ecosystem. So there's going to be a fundamental shift in how Google's going to have to start thinking about where do we start to monetize, where do we really start to focus and double down, especially as the conversations about the divestiture of the ad exchange and the advertising piece start to get split out. So there's going to be, I think, a lot of changes that are going to end up happening for Google, and Google's going to start to really think about where can I still continue to generate my revenue. And we just talked about YouTube being like the big thing, number one streaming platform. It's going to be a bigger media company than Walt Disney by the end of this year is what a lot of analysts are saying. They have opportunity, but it's just trying to figure out like what is really going to be the focus for 2025 and beyond.
Oh gosh, okay. It's going to be a while, I think, before we see what the remediations will be. I think we saw this in the previous case where it was, we still don't actually have a declarative ruling. We have the recommendations from the DOJ of, hey, you should potentially divest Chrome. We don't know if that's actually going to come to light. Stay tuned, though. I think we'll probably be back here in around 3 months, probably discussing at least what's happening on the other case and maybe on this case in perhaps the next 3 to 6 as well. But the bottom line here is this ruling is a big deal. It's not just a legal slap on the wrist, but it's a signal that the courts are finally catching up to how the power is concentrated in digital advertising infrastructure. One of the interesting things I saw in the ad tech community yesterday was how well articulated the judge's ruling was in terms of its understanding of ad tech and its understanding of how Google operates. Oftentimes we look at these rulings and look, there's always the Senator, we run ads quote as to how little politicians and perhaps they always do what the Supreme Court, like, do you use an iPad kind of thing, like they're so out of touch with reality. This judge clearly is in touch with reality, not just in touch with reality, but perhaps smarter than half the practitioners in the ad tech space at large. Because I read it and I was like, wow, that is a nuanced perspective. Well done. Like they've got some excellent folks around them helping them understand what is actually happening here. But if the remedies go the way that many expect, we could be looking at the start of a more open, a more competitive ad ecosystem, something that could benefit everyone on the open intent, especially publishers. And I think that's the key to a beautiful open intent that is available to all. But with that, thank you, Brian, for sharing your insights with us today. And if you out there are still watching, thank you for joining us today. We'd love to hear from you, what you think is going to happen next. Share it in the comments on whatever platform you're watching this on. Until next time, though, have a great day.